Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Robert?
Yeah, fine, thanks. I wanted to talk about the Croydon Supported Self-Employment Academy. Um,
Okay.
and one of the things I wanted to talk about was the commissioning side of it. And the first question I'd really got was obviously you commissioned the service, and what were your objectives in thinking when you actually commissioned the service?
Right. So I think so. Probably one of the keys was looking around, and I was working with people who had social care needs and were of working age. So that's effectively you're up to 65 and beyond for those people who wanted to work longer. And one of the things we were very, very clear on is that the the figures for people who are actually in employment or even volunteering were pitifully low, both for people with mental health problems and for learning disabilities. So there'd been a lot of discussion amongst senior managers and commissioners about the need to actually prioritize that without there being much thinking about how it could be done. Clearly, there's some really good work was being done, and I suppose by Croydon Council as a good corporate citizen in terms of, I suppose, setting up schemes which follow the pattern of sort of employment, where you've got an employer and people are going in and trying to get employed status there. One of the things that in my experience, not working in public health previously and in regeneration, was that actually the some of the conditions that people had and uh, the intermittent process whereby they wouldn't necessarily be able to be consistent employees or consistently in employment, meant that actually that model was actually one of the barriers to success. And it's always, and I suppose one of my thoughts was that if we could look at alternative models, either by sort of job slicing sort of roles, so that actually perhaps one person couldn't fulfill a role consistently, but actually three people probably could, because actually there's some built-in cover, some flexibility, and perhaps even a wider range of skills, and that could be really attractive to employers. Um, and that will be a different sort of model. That will be a sort of more like a self-employment model or social care model.
And,
Um,
and sorry.
but so I suppose that was some of my thinking. Is a way of actually trying to widen the offer. Now, fortunately, I think not only had I experience of running employment issues, but there's one of the senior service managers had also come from an employment background as well, and we had a fairly informal conversation and saying, "Do you think this could work?" Fortunately, he was in a position because of his budgetary control over direct payments to actually potentially put some money where our mouths were on this one in terms of a trial.
When we came, because I remember we put this proposal together, and I'd met with a colleague of yours in the council, Emma Shepherd, who
Hmm.
helped me drive this forward. And we'd looked at this, and we felt it could work if we partnered with another agency that could do the teaching. And we came together, and we'd had numerous meetings with the council. Um, what made you think that this might work? Because we gave you no promises. It was just a little bit of me saying, in my gut, I felt that if we actually had a supported self-employment, that the model could work. What made you believe in us?
Um, so I'd not come across you guys at this stage. So I spoke to Emma as part of the floating the ideas around in the council, and a couple of other colleagues, and I suppose it's one of those things when you Simon Wadsworth, who's the senior manager, and I, so we wanted, it sounded like we'd hit on something, but we didn't know if there was anything out there. And I suppose it was talking to Emma, and Emma says, "Oh, I know exactly the people that you need to talk to," and there's a link into the base. So in actual fact, one of the first things we got was I suppose the one thing that commissioners need to know is, even if they're going to do something unusual, they're not actually going to be the people that are doing it for the first time. And so it was sort of reassuring to us that there was something out there. There were people that were doing it. There was some literature around it. It wasn't a completely original model.
Although it was in fact employment, because there was very few people. You were right, there were many good supported employment models, Crwyn Castle having one themselves. But the self-employment was very new, and I think this was a bit that we hadn't tested ourselves, and we were wanting to test, and that's where the programme had come up, where we'd looked and said we wanted to try and test this, but it would never got off the ground as if you hadn't have turned around and said there is potentially a way of funding this, which is let's do the pilot. And
I was going to say, I think the thing where we were startlingly original, also slightly worryingly original in this, was the idea of actually addressing some of the problems that we got with a poor take-up of direct payments, but also understanding that actually one of the reasons that direct payments at that stage weren't working great is the focus was purely on domiciliary care. It was on personal care. It was on personal assistance. Yet actually one of the needs that we were regularly identifying was the need to have meaningful activity during the day and pointing in the direction of employment. And there was and I didn't see, and I couldn't find any real model for fighting, what's the best way to put it, of actually bringing employment into direct payments. Most people on direct payments would employ relatives, or maybe an agency, but actually the support that people need to get from a situation of being with workless, and potentially being workless from adolescence, is that you actually need a whole load of skills. You need people with knowledge. You need people with ins, so that they can help you get a start on it. And that's not something you can get either from a friend or from your relatives. So the biggest gap in social care needs for people who are of working age and relatively young in working age is actually the support they need for to get into employment. And actually there was no obvious model for using direct payments, but talking about how we could do it, it came up with two things: quite a simple idea, and also the principle of direct payments was already there. There was a budget for it. It was a budget that was held by two senior managers who were closely involved in discussing the scheme. So in actual fact, we short-circuited the need to put together a business case and to get a block of investment, because actually what we were doing, we were just mobilizing for the social care funding to actually address probably the most dramatic need that people had in terms of social care. If they were in their 20s and 30s and they'd not worked, and they wanted to be more occupied, they wanted to sort of develop some of their ideas, and it was great. So in actual fact, what we missed out that stage of developing a business plan, and for the reasons we've been talking about here now, I think it'd been really hard to have won that case for a business plan. It's a model that didn't exist. No one else was doing it around direct payments. Who was going to, and we would be asking for a new block of funding.
Could you explain to people? Some people won't know what direct payments are, and me as a provider, I'm quite used to having sort of block grants, and it was very, very different. But can you just briefly explain what direct payments are for people who are not aware?
Briefly, I don't know. I can have a bash. So, so an awful lot of social care and social care needs are met through services which are commissioned by the council. So we enter into a contract and get someone to either come into your own home and provide care, or we pay for you to go to places, and the relationship there is one of the council needs assessment being done by social workers, the right sort of place being identified, an agreement to fund it, and then that funding goes through. Historically, and for a whole variety of political reasons of very, very different sorts, the idea came that actually, why are we not giving people more choice, more control over the care that they need? About 20 years ago, the idea was developed and launched in a number of areas. So actually, we can't be confident that we're finding the best answers for your needs, and there are plenty of people within the disability communities who are also arguing for more control over how the sorts of care that they got. And so there was this, I suppose, a collision of two sets of ideas, one which was about sort of being more entrepreneurial in our approach. Another one was actually about being less controlling and giving people more control over their own lives. So it came together, and it was promoted throughout from the 90s, late 90s onwards, under all political regimes, was the idea that more and more social care would be in the direct control of either the person that needed the social care or their close family and relatives. And so the assessment is the assessment of need stays the same, but instead of going out and buying the care that meets that need, we give the person and their family and their closest carers the money and the control over where they buy it from.
For me, it was quite scary, because we suddenly had a system of being able to have £2,000 per candidate that we would split between ourselves and Tree Shepherd. Doing this splitting, that wasn't a problem, and doing that side wasn't a problem. The scary and the hard part for us was of having to recruit and having to use the system. From my point of view, the system has always been the slight problem, in the fact that it seems to be described as simple and not too much of a problem, but the reality for many of the candidates is they found it very hard to get any information. And in fact, we had one system where we had one person with visual impairment who, although he would have had to wait 6 months for the council to come around to have someone help him fill the form in. So we helped him fill the form. But I think some of the positive sides is it allowed us to be innovative. I think where we felt we would never get this off the ground without direct payments or a form of funding that was different. And it does feel like it's fair that you're being charged for a service that's how much it would normally cost.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was quite unusual is that we used some models of direct care or direct payments, which Croydon wasn't used to using at that stage. So the idea of effectively several people coming together and sharing their direct payments in order to get the service, and so that helped us get round the whole business planning, business case, and probably the crippling decision-making process, which was eventually not happening.
And I was quite definite as saying is we couldn't afford if a person only turned up one week, we would have to sort of charge them for that amount. But actually,
and that was quite capable. We were quite capable of doing that, and I think that took a bit of convincing that as a council we can't pay for a service that's not being received. However, the reality is, if you go to university and you enroll on a course and you change your mind or it doesn't go ahead, then you don't get the money back, as it were. There's an immediate cost to setting it up and running it, and we have to bite the bullet. But actually, in social care, it's not unusual for people to have care packages which are £2,000 a week. Something that is going to cost £2,000 over the course of a year, and give people the opportunity to engage in activity. That's not expensive.
Were you surprised with the take-up, because we only had one person in the end who did drop out? The rest of the people.
I thought it was phenomenal. Actually, I've run employment initiatives and learning initiatives around health and social care for people who don't have disabilities, and there we were accustomed to 30% dropout rates, not 1 out of 15 people.
And I think one of the things that in the end is, when you're looking at commissioning, is obviously everyone looks at the commission and the first thing they say, well, how many people are running businesses? And well, actually 4 people are actually running successful business, and I would think another 2 people are doing almost what I would call sort of voluntary type self-employment businesses, which is keeping them healthy, and 3 other people have got jobs. So I think in reality we felt happy, but it was interesting. I'll be interested to see what your views about what you felt the commissioning objectives were for this group of people, not just the jobs, because I think we always look at the one level sometimes.
Yeah, so I was keen in terms of setting some targets for you guys that they would be realistic, so that so taking people who are quite a long way from the workplace or from self-employment, and in a course of a relatively compressed teaching period, to expect I wouldn't have dared to suggest the results would have been as good as you actually did get. And I think you would have probably kicked back very strongly if I said, I'm actually going to be looking for 1/3 of this cohort of people to be in business by the 6-month stage. You'd have said, come on, be realistic. But there are all the other benefits that come from that: increased self-confidence, ability to hold down a independent living, meaningful activity, lower levels of care, more self-reliance. All of those are the sorts of things I would expect to come from this, and I'm sure that's something you've seen with this cohort.
Yeah, I think we were amazed as we did some baseline things around things like Warwick, Edinburgh, around health and well-being, and what was and we have, obviously, part of that, we had an evaluation done by Keith Bates as regards this, and it showed in there is that the health and well-being of every single person who was put on the course, regardless of what happened, they were in a much better place after they'd finished. And of course, really what has surprised me was I suspected when we started it we'd have the course and maybe we'd have a few people who'd want the support on the business. I was surprised how much support people not only needed but actually wanted, and that we're still supporting now. So not that I'm getting paid for it now, but it's pleasurable because it's showing that those businesses are moving forward.
I think I think it's going to be really interesting so going forwards, not and especially after COVID-19. I think the days when care homes are used routinely to provide long-term accommodation for people with mental health problems and with learning disabilities are over. I don't think. I think the disadvantage of this that sort of industrialization of social care is going to be almost overwhelming at the end of this, and actually linking to people living more independently. It's going to have to be that's going to have to be the future of care, and that should give people the flexibility to be able to look at employment. But if you think about it, someone under 65, and 65 is just a random date now, so. But someone under 65 going into a care home after 12 months, suddenly being down to £24 a week personal expenses as the only case. There's absolutely no incentive for people to get part-time employment in that situation. No incentive for them to earn money, no freedom, and actually it's a very restricted practice. And in a situation where we've now seen large, significant amounts of health problems as a result of people being locked down in that sort of environment, I think people have got to have homes of their own.
I think what this proved, the course did prove, is that nearly every person who came on that course wanted to set up their own business, not because they wanted to make huge amounts of money, but actually they wanted to do something that they felt was giving back into society. And I think that was the biggest driver, that every single person who came on that course, they wanted to run their own business because they wanted to be an entrepreneur. They had that tremendous entrepreneur spirit. When we first started it, they all talked about their disability, and there was a big conversation about that. By the second break, they were all talking about their businesses. And from that moment on, there was a mutual understanding that they had different disabilities, and they helped each other. And we had people with Down syndrome to people who'd been studying law degrees. There was a massive range of groups. But the one thing that held them all together as a group was that they were actually wanting to be entrepreneurs. Yeah. And there was there was a big entrepreneur spirit in there.
I thought that was amazing. Actually, that was it was the same sort of spirit that you would expect if you set up a new business startup sort of program. It's the same frame of mind. It was the same seriousness about the intent. I suppose that's the other thing just to reflect on as we come out of the life-changing experience which has been locked down, and that which is actually the commercial opportunities are going that exist for doing more business online, and the move away from the conventional workplace where everyone comes together, does the business, and then goes home.
Very interesting.
That's going to be so interesting, really, and I think for programs like yours.
In the new cohort we've got, we have one of the people who is doing okay because they want to be a virtual administrator, and actually it's a perfect time to launch her business because there is a need for people with virtual administration. So I do think they are the new cohort are working during this COVID-19, and they're adapting their businesses, and they've been equally as successful. We did it on a smaller group this time of 5 people, but again, 4 of them are still doing their own business, and one person has started looking for a job instead because they felt that was what they needed to do. So it's been equally as successful. I think from my point of view as the recipient of this funding, is that the one area that is the worry is that in a way I would almost like the block grant gives you security as a chief executive of an organisation. The cash flow can be the worrying aspect, is when you're trying to start a course on a time, and for instance you've got a maybe October the 15th, but by October the 10th, you've got only 1 out of the 15 people actually approved for direct payments. That makes it very hard. And I think going forward, I think there probably needs to be some sort of approved system of saying this is the course and maybe there's a payback or not, or some system that makes it more viable for the service to actually make sure that happens. I don't know how that could happen, but it makes it very hard sometimes to be doing it, and there's a lot of admin work involved.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think you made an important initial point there, which is that, if the model is between an entrepreneurial model, or it's a pay-as-you-go sort of model, or the block grant, then actually the block grant has always had a huge vulnerability that if the wind changes direction, there's a pandemic, or if there's a change of council, then in actual fact, the vulnerability is high, and you can lose all the funding.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, one of the things I would say,
certainly not against the entrepreneurial side of it. It's maybe just getting the.
Well, I was going on to say that I think that's true. That actually, I think there needs to be some understanding that there is a vulnerability, that cash flow is going to be an issue. That means being paid promptly and on time is absolutely crucial, and I know a lot of local authorities have struggled with that sort of model, and that's absolutely the case. Also, I think, and I don't know how it's going, but I think the idea of a rolling program rather than as we're doing it in almost like terms or set periods might be a more useful model.
Turn the model around now so that it's 5 people. Obviously, we've been affected by COVID because we're going to have to start the new cohort. Trying to recruit the new cohort is virtually impossible at the minute, but we're hoping to do that through Zoom. We're hoping to start in June with a new cohort. We're hoping not to have to do it through webinar and Zoom, because we feel that one of the biggest plus points of the course was the fact, to begin with, is everyone's in the same room together. And in the new one, when there was 5 people, that worked very well, still in the same way. So we're still hoping that we can run it in that way, but obviously, like everything, we'll have to adapt to the way things are working. But I think you should be proud that it's still going, and we're still getting people into self-employment in Croydon, and still one of the first boroughs to actually really sort of get people with disabilities who want to set up their own businesses into self-employment.
Yeah, and I think there's going to need to be more, and I think there's still lots of opportunities for developments around this. And I suppose one of the things I had at the back of my mind starting it out originally was actually, do we just, is there a sort of nursery slope where we bring people together to sort of run something like a drop shipping business? So it's not complicated. It's not about manufacturing. It's actually just about selling. Learn the selling stuff. Learn the online selling sort of stuff, and the marketing. Is there a way of coming together to create marketing platforms which have a unique selling proposition? And so in actual fact, you do need people to administer it, and it may be that they've got skills which are not about marketing, but actually just about making sure everything's done quickly and on time. But that could be a real interesting development for people to actually have the confidence that they can actually make money from doing that sort of thing.
Certainly hope that we can sort of develop this and from this seed of maybe using some of the direct payment money, we can make some more innovations within this. And I say we're only just starting on that journey, but I certainly think as we're going along, we are adapting, and I think there will be ways that we can almost be helping more people in their own businesses. For instance, you have the virtual administrator. There is a need that many people who are doing their businesses could use that virtual administration. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and I think that's where the direct payment model gives a lot more flexibility for entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah, and I think they're even so. I think now one of the other things, again, looking at the impact of COVID, there are a whole load of things which have been knocking around in a half-hearted way, which is suddenly becoming quite interesting. And in the past, I ran a small fine art gallery, and it was very difficult to, 10 years ago, to outside London to make any sort of significant earnings from that because of the overheads that are attached to it. All of those small galleries now are looking at extinction in the face as a result of not trading for a long time. But I'm talking to some of the artists that I used to sell, and about using some of the time that I've got on my hands at the moment to set up a virtual gallery, not a website, a virtual gallery, a gallery that you can actually go and look at the art, and you can put on shows, and you can have opening nights, and hopefully some of the stuff's going to be affordable. And I'm hoping that in the next few weeks I'll probably be in a situation to be able to launch that. Now that's using a bit of software that I've been aware of since I had a gallery, but actually it's not really caught on, which is basically an online gallery.
Which I think is a good thing of coming to the end of this, of saying, the fact that you used some commissioning that was, I think, entrepreneurial in its vision, actually helped disabled entrepreneurs actually start thriving. And it's something that maybe as commissioners you don't get told of. Sometimes doing something like this, actually, you should be proud of, because it actually enabled people actually to get their own businesses.
Absolutely. It's a good place to end that, I think.